The fork trembled in my 8-year-old son Jake's hand as my sister Madison slid a crumpled job application across our parents' mahogany dining table. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the paper with calculated precision. "Since you clearly can't provide for Jake properly, Aurora," she announced, her voice dripping with false concern that made my stomach churn. "I thought you might appreciate this opportunity." The application was for a janitorial position at Henderson Marketing Solutions, her prestigious firm downtown. Jake's face flushed crimson, his eyes filling with tears he desperately tried to hide. Mom and Dad nodded approvingly at Madison's gesture, completely oblivious to the humiliation radiating from their grandson. What none of them knew was that I secretly owned the very building Madison's company rented. I stared at the application, my hands steady, despite the rage building inside my chest. The silence stretched like a taut wire before I spoke with deliberate calm. "Actually, Madison, I think I'll pass this along to my assistant. You see, I own the building your company rents from." Madison's laugh was sharp and bitter, cutting through the air like broken glass. "Oh, please, Aurora, don't embarrass yourself further with these ridiculous fantasies." She turned to our parents with theatrical disbelief. "Can you believe this? She's so desperate to avoid facing reality that she's making up elaborate lies." Dad set down his coffee cup with a heavy sigh. "Sweetheart, we know you're struggling, but making up stories isn't going to help Jake. Madison is trying to offer you a real solution here." Mom nodded sympathetically. "Honey, there's no shame in accepting help from family. Pride won't put food on the table." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my digital files until I found the lease agreements. These aren't stories. I inherited Grandma Eleanor's property portfolio 2 years ago. I've been keeping it quiet to avoid complications. Madison leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she examined the documents on my screen. "These are obviously fake. You can download anything from the internet these days. Did you seriously think we'd fall for some amateur Photoshop job?" Jake shrank deeper into his chair, watching his mother defend herself against his aunt's accusations. Madison's voice grew more venomous with each word. "This is pathetically desperate even for you, Aurora. Making up elaborate business fantasies to avoid admitting you need help. It's actually quite sad." The contempt in her voice hit me like a physical blow. Here I was, trying to share something significant about my life, and my own family had completely written me off as a delusional failure. Madison continued her assault, emboldened by our parents' supportive murmurs. "Look at yourself, Aurora. You're 32 years old, living in that tiny apartment, driving a car that's older than Jake, and you want us to believe you own downtown real estate, the woman who couldn't even afford Jake's school shoes last month." The sting of that last comment made Jake flinch visibly. I had struggled with those shoes, working extra freelance graphic design projects late into the night to afford them. But Madison had no idea about the careful financial planning I'd been doing, the way I'd been reinvesting every penny of rental income back into property improvements and acquisitions. "I understand why this is hard to believe," I said quietly. "But Henderson Marketing Solutions pays me $4,800 monthly for their third-floor lease. They've been consistently late 7 times in the past year, and they still owe me a $600 penalty fee from October." Madison's confident smirk faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Anyone can look up rental prices online and make up specific numbers. You're getting more creative with your fiction, I'll give you that." Our mother reached across the table to pat my hand with well-intentioned pity. "Aurora, sweetie, we love you, but you need professional help if you're having trouble distinguishing fantasy from reality. Madison's offering you honest work, not charity." The weight of their disbelief settled over me like a heavy blanket. Here was my family, people who were supposed to know and support me, treating me like a disturbed child spinning tales for attention. Jake watched everything unfold, learning a harsh lesson about how quickly people could dismiss others based on appearances and assumptions. Madison straightened in her chair, her expression shifting to one of righteous authority. "Since we're clearly not getting through to you with logic, let me put this in terms you might understand. I'm offering you a chance to earn honest money doing honest work. Yes, it's cleaning, but there's dignity in all work when you're providing for your child." She gestured toward Jake, whose embarrassment deepened with every word. "That little boy deserves better than a mother who lives in fantasy land. He needs stability, consistent meals, decent clothes, and a role model who deals with reality instead of escaping into elaborate delusions." The irony was almost unbearable. Madison, who had no children of her own, lecturing me about parenthood while sitting in my building's rental income without realizing it. Every month, her company's rent payment went directly into the account I used for Jake's needs, his education savings, and our future security. I maintain 8 rental properties in downtown Springfield. I continued hoping against hope that someone would listen. The building at 215 Oak Street houses, Henderson Marketing Solutions, along with Chen's architecture firm, Springfield Legal Services, and Bella Vista Restaurant. Madison rolled her eyes dramatically. She's even memorized street addresses now. This is getting concerning. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Aurora, maybe Madison's right about getting some professional support. There are counselors who specialize in helping single mothers cope with stress and financial pressure." The suggestion felt like another knife twist. They weren't just dismissing my business success, they were questioning my mental stability. Jake's small voice broke through the tension. "Mom works really hard," he said quietly, barely above a whisper. "She's always on her laptop at night talking to people about buildings and fixing things." Madison's expression softened slightly as she looked at Jake, but her tone remained patronizing. "Of course she works hard, sweetheart. But sometimes grown-ups have to face difficult truths about their situations. Your mom wants to take care of you, but she needs help to do it properly." I felt my heart break watching Jake process this conversation, seeing his confusion as the adults in his life painted his mother as either delusional or incompetent. The child who had watched me successfully manage tenant concerns, coordinate maintenance issues, and build a thriving property management business was now hearing those same accomplishments dismissed as fantasy. The evening that had started as a simple family dinner had transformed into a tribunal, where my own relatives judged me guilty of failure without bothering to examine any evidence. Madison's job application lay between us like an accusation, a symbol of how completely my family had misunderstood my life and capabilities. Monday morning arrived with Madison feeling particularly pleased with herself as she strutted into Henderson Marketing Solutions, wearing her new designer blazer. The weekend had reinforced her belief that she'd done the right thing by offering Aurora that cleaning position. Sometimes tough love was exactly what family needed, and Madison prided herself on being the responsible sister. Her corner office overlooked Oak Street, and she settled into her ergonomic chair with a satisfied sigh. The quarterly reports needed organizing before her 11 o'clock client presentation, and Madison attacked the task with her usual efficiency. Client files, vendor contracts, and lease documentation all required careful categorization. As she reached for the building lease folder, a signature caught her attention. The flowing script at the bottom of their rental agreement made her pause. Aurora Stevens, property owner. Madison blinked hard, certain she was misreading the document. She grabbed her reading glasses and examined the signature more closely. The handwriting was unmistakably familiar. Every Christmas card, birthday note, and thank you letter Aurora had ever written bore that same distinctive flourish. Madison's hands began trembling as she flipped through the lease pages, finding Aurora's name repeated throughout the legal documentation. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself, fumbling for her phone. She speed-dialed Hartwell Property Management, the company that handled their building's maintenance and rent collection. "Hartwell Property Management, this is Stephanie speaking. How may I help you?" "Yes, hi, this is Madison Phillips from Henderson Marketing Solutions. I need to verify something about our building lease. We rent the 3rd floor at 215 Oak Street." "Certainly, Ms. Phillips. What information do you need?" Madison's voice cracked slightly. "Who exactly owns our building? I mean, who do our rent payments go to?" "Let me pull up your file." "Okay, here we are. The property owner is Aurora Stevens. She's been our client for about 2 years now, ever since she inherited the building from her grandmother. Is there a maintenance issue you need to report? The phone nearly slipped from Madison's grasp. Aurora Stevens, she repeated numbly, and she's definitely the owner, not just some property manager or something. Oh no, Miss Stevens owns the building outright. She's actually been planning some major renovations lately. I believe she mentioned scheduling a walk-through with tenants soon to discuss the upcoming changes. Madison ended the call abruptly, her mind reeling. The sister she'd humiliated just 2 days ago, the woman she'd offered a janitorial job to out of pity, was her landlord. Every month for the past 18 months, Madison had been writing rent checks that ultimately went to Aurora. Her assistant knocked on the doorframe. "Miss Phillips, your 10:30 appointment is here early. Should I send them in?" Madison barely heard the question. She was frantically calculating numbers in her head, remembering every complaint she'd made about the building, every time she'd demanded immediate attention for minor issues, every late payment that had resulted in stern notices from the property management company. "Miss Phillips," her assistant repeated, looking concerned. "What? Oh yes, give me 5 minutes." Madison pulled up her company's financial records, scrolling through months of rent payments, $4,800 every month, just like Aurora had said. The October late fee Aurora mentioned was right there in the records charged because Madison had been traveling for a conference and forgotten to submit payment on time. The office walls seemed to close in around her as the full scope of her mistake became clear. Aurora hadn't been fantasizing or desperately making up stories. She'd been telling the absolute truth about owning downtown real estate, about being a successful businesswoman, about being completely capable of providing for Jake. Madison's phone buzzed with a text message from Aurora. "Good morning, Madison. I'll be stopping by your office this afternoon with my architect and contractor to discuss the renovation plans I mentioned. Please have your lease handy for reference. Professional regards, A. Stevens, property owner." The formal tone of the message sent chills down Madison's spine. Aurora was no longer her struggling little sister. She was now her landlord, and Madison had seriously offended her just days before. The memory of Saturday's dinner conversation played back in excruciating detail every dismissive comment and condescending gesture, now magnified by the knowledge of Aurora's true position. Madison thought about all the times she'd complained to the property management company about minor inconveniences, the imperious tone she'd used when demanding faster responses to her requests, the entitled attitude she'd displayed toward building policies. Aurora had probably received detailed reports about every single interaction. Her computer screen displayed the morning schedule, but Madison couldn't focus on anything except the growing dread in her stomach. Aurora was coming here to Madison's workplace in a professional capacity. The power dynamic between them had shifted completely, and Madison was entirely unprepared for the reversal. The irony was devastating. Madison had spent years feeling superior to Aurora, pitying her sister's apparent struggles, while secretly enjoying her own success by comparison. Now she discovered that Aurora had been quietly building an impressive business portfolio while Madison had been playing dress-up in an office she didn't even own. Her assistant appeared in the doorway again. "Miss Phillips, your appointment is getting impatient. Shall I reschedule?" Madison nodded absently, her thoughts consumed by the afternoon's impending meeting. Aurora's text had been professional, but cold, a stark contrast to the warm, family-oriented conversations they'd always had before. Madison realized she might have permanently damaged their relationship with her weekend performance. The lease documents in her hands felt like evidence of her own arrogance. Every page bore Aurora's signature proof that her sister had been telling the truth, while Madison attacked her credibility. The shame was overwhelming, but worse than the embarrassment was the growing fear about what Aurora might do with her newfound leverage. At precisely 2:00 that afternoon, Aurora walked through the glass doors of Henderson Marketing Solutions with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She wore a navy business suit that Madison had never seen before, and her hair was pulled back in a sophisticated chignon that made her look older and more authoritative. Behind her followed a tall man in a hard hat, carrying architectural blueprints, and a woman with a contractor's clipboard. Madison's receptionist looked confused as Aurora approached the front desk. "I'm Aurora Stevens, here to meet with Ms. Phillips about the building renovations. She should be expecting me." "Of course, Ms. Stevens. Right this way." Madison's office door was open, and she looked up from her computer with an expression of barely concealed panic. The weekend's confident smirk had been replaced by nervous uncertainty, and her usual commanding presence seemed diminished. "Good afternoon, Madison," Aurora said cordially, extending her hand for a professional handshake. "Thank you for making time in your schedule. This is David Chen from Architectural Innovations and Jennifer Walsh from Premier Construction. We're here to discuss the renovation timeline for your floor." Madison shook Aurora's hand awkwardly, hyper-aware that her employees were watching this interaction with curiosity. "Please have a seat. Can I offer anyone coffee?" "That won't be necessary. This is a business meeting, not a social visit." Aurora's tone was pleasant but firm. She gestured for David to unroll the blueprints on Madison's conference table. "David, would you walk Ms. Phillips through the planned improvements?" David spread the architectural drawings across the table, pointing to various sections with his pen. "We're completely modernizing this building to attract premium tenants. New elevator systems, upgraded electrical, throughout fiber optic infrastructure, renovated bathrooms, and luxury common areas. The transformation will position this property as Class A office space." Madison studied the blueprints with growing alarm. The scope of work was massive, involving months of construction and significant building improvements. Jennifer stepped forward with her clipboard. "The construction timeline is ambitious but manageable. We'll begin next month with the electrical and plumbing rough, and followed by structural modifications, then finishing work. The entire project should complete within 4 months." Aurora nodded approvingly. "The building will be spectacular when finished. Of course, the rent structure will need to reflect the upgraded amenities and prime location. Madison, your current lease expires at the end of next month, which gives us perfect timing to transition to the new rate schedule." Madison's voice was barely audible. "New rate schedule." Aurora pulled out a folder containing fresh lease documents. "Market rate for Class A office space in this location runs between $12,000 and $15,000 monthly for your square footage. Given the premium improvements we're implementing, I'm setting your rate at $13,500 effective with your lease renewal." The number hit Madison like a physical blow. $13,500 represented nearly triple their current rent, an increase that would bankrupt Henderson Marketing Solutions within 6 months. Madison's face drained of all color as she processed the financial implications. "I understand this represents a significant adjustment," Aurora continued with professional detachment. "However, the building's improved value justifies the new pricing structure. Tenants who prefer not to renew at the updated rate have 30 days' notice to make alternative arrangements." David rolled up his blueprints with practiced efficiency. "We'll need to coordinate construction access with your daily operations. The work will generate some noise and disruption, but will minimize interference with business hours when possible." Madison found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Aurora, surely we can discuss this privately. As family, I thought perhaps we could work out some kind of arrangement." Aurora's expression remained carefully neutral. "I don't mix personal relationships with business decisions, Madison. Every tenant receives identical treatment based on lease terms and market conditions. I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining professional boundaries." The subtle emphasis on professional boundaries was a clear reference to Madison's weekend behavior, and the message wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Aurora was demonstrating exactly the kind of business-like approach Madison had claimed to value above family sentiment. Jennifer consulted her timeline chart. "We'll need signed lease agreements or move-out confirmations by Friday to finalize our construction schedule. Tenants who choose to relocate will need to coordinate their departure with our renovation start date." Madison's employees had gathered near her office door, trying to overhear the conversation. The mention of potential relocation sent worried murmurs through the small crowd. Aurora noticed their concern and addressed them directly. "I want to assure everyone that existing tenants are welcome to remain in the building at the updated lease rates. The improvements will create a much more pleasant work environment, and the building will be a prestigious address for any business." One of Madison's account managers stepped forward nervously. "Ms. Stevens, will there be any flexibility in the payment structure? Our company has been here for 2 years, and we've never caused any problems." Aurora's smile was warm but businesslike. "I appreciate your loyalty to this location. The property management company handles all payment arrangements and lease modifications. If Henderson Marketing Solutions chooses to renew, they can discuss payment schedules directly with Hartwell Property Management." Madison realized that Aurora was expertly deflecting any appearance of personal favoritism, while making it clear that renewal depended entirely on Madison's company's ability to meet the new financial terms. The power dynamic in the room was unmistakable. Aurora held all the cards, and Madison was completely at her mercy. David packed up his materials and shook hands with Madison. "It's been a pleasure working with you, Ms. Phillips. These renovations will really transform the building into something special." Jennifer followed suit, adding, "We'll send you a detailed construction timeline by email tomorrow. Please don't hesitate to contact us with any questions about the process." Aurora remained seated as her consultants left, studying Madison with the same professional detachment she'd maintained throughout the meeting. "Madison, I want to be clear about something. This building renovation has been planned for months long before our family dinner on Saturday. The timing is purely coincidental." Madison nodded mutely, understanding that Aurora was offering her a small mercy by clarifying that this wasn't personal revenge, just business reality. However, Aurora continued, "I do think it's worth reflecting on how quickly assumptions can change when we learn new information about people's circumstances. You have the same 30 days as every other tenant to decide whether this location still meets your needs." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Madison had spent Saturday evening lecturing Aurora about facing reality and accepting help, and now she was the one who needed to confront some harsh truths about her own situation. Aurora gathered her papers and stood to leave. "I'll have the lease renewal document sent to your attention by Thursday. Take your time reviewing the terms and let me know if you have any questions about the building improvements." As Aurora walked toward the office door, Madison's voice cracked slightly. "Aurora, wait. About Saturday night, I owe you an apology." Aurora paused in the doorway, turning back with an expression that mixed sadness with disappointment. Madison Jake was sitting at that table watching his family treat his mother like a charity case. Think about what that taught him, about respect and assumptions. Some lessons cost more than others. With that, Aurora left Madison sitting alone in her office, surrounded by lease documents she couldn't afford and facing the collapse of everything she'd built her identity around. By Wednesday evening, Madison was desperate enough to call an emergency family meeting. She'd spent 2 sleepless nights running numbers, calling other office buildings, and facing the impossible reality of her situation. Every comparable office space in downtown Springfield was either unavailable or equally expensive, and relocating her business would cost thousands in moving expenses she didn't have. Mom had prepared her famous pot roast for the occasion, treating the gathering like a regular family dinner, despite the tension crackling through the air. Dad carved the meat with his usual precision, while Madison fidgeted nervously with her napkin. Aurora arrived exactly on time, professionally dressed and carrying a leather portfolio. "Aurora, sweetie, sit down," Mom said, warmly patting the chair beside her. Madison explained about this little misunderstanding with the building situation. "I'm sure we can work something out as a family." Aurora took her seat, calmly placing her portfolio beside her plate. Jake wasn't present tonight. He was staying with his friend Tommy's family, sparing him from another uncomfortable adult conversation about his mother's supposed shortcomings. Dad cleared his throat importantly. Now, Aurora, we appreciate that you've done well for yourself with this property business, but Madison's been nothing but supportive of you over the years. Surely family loyalty counts for something in your decisions. Madison jumped in quickly. I realize I may have misunderstood your situation on Saturday, Aurora, but tripling my rent overnight seems extreme even for business purposes. Can't we find some middle ground that works for both of us? Aurora cut her pot roast methodically before responding. Madison, let me ask you something. In your professional experience, would you recommend that a client accept substantially below market rates for services simply because they happen to be related to the service provider? Well, no, but this is different. We're family. Interesting perspective. Aurora opened her portfolio and withdrew a thick folder. Since we're discussing family support and professional relationships, I thought you might want to review these financial documents I discovered while researching tenant payment histories. Madison's face went pale as Aurora spread bank statements and accounting records across the dinner table. Dad leaned forward, adjusting his reading glasses to examine the papers more closely. These are your business account records, Madison. I obtained them legally through my property management company when Henderson Marketing Solutions applied for lease renewal. Standard procedure for evaluating tenant financial stability. Aurora pointed to specific entries highlighted in yellow. These withdrawals from your client account don't correspond to any business expenses in your accounting software. $7,000 in March, $4,000 in April, $6,800 in May, all transferred to your personal checking account. Madison's hands trembled as she recognized her own transaction history laid out for her family's inspection. Aurora, those are legitimate business transfers. Sometimes I need to advance company funds for personal expenses. Except these withdrawals exceed your monthly salary by significant margins, and they're coming directly from client project budgets, not company profit accounts. Aurora's tone remained professional, but her words cut like surgical instruments. This withdrawal from the Riverside restaurant account happened 3 days before you bought that new BMW. This one from the Memorial Hospital project coincided with your vacation to Miami. Mom gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. Madison, please tell me this isn't what it looks like. Dad studied the bank records more closely, his expression growing darker with each page. As a retired accountant, he recognized embezzlement when he saw it clearly documented. Madison, these transactions are textbook examples of client fund misappropriation. Madison's composure finally cracked completely. I always intended to pay it back. Business has been slow and I needed to maintain certain appearances for client confidence. You can't succeed in marketing if you look unsuccessful. Aurora continued her methodical presentation. The Riverside restaurant account shows a balance discrepancy of $11,400. Memorial Hospital's project budget is short, $9,200. The Springfield Chamber of Commerce account has been systematically drained over 6 months. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Madison had been stealing from her own clients to fund a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford. The designer clothes, expensive car, luxury apartment, and upscale restaurant meals had all been financed through systematic embezzlement. How long have you known about this? Dad demanded, his voice heavy with disappointment. Aurora's expression softened slightly. I discovered it yesterday while reviewing Henderson Marketing Solutions' financial stability for lease renewal purposes. Standard due diligence revealed multiple red flags in their client account management. Madison buried her face in her hands, finally accepting that her carefully constructed facade was collapsing. I got in over my head. The apartment was too expensive, but I'd already signed the lease. The car payment was crushing me, but I needed reliable transportation for client meetings. Everything snowballed. Mom reached across the table toward Madison, tears in her eyes. Honey, why didn't you ask for help instead of stealing? Because I was supposed to be the successful one. Madison's voice cracked with emotion. I was the sister with the college degree, the professional job, the stable life. I couldn't admit that I was failing while Aurora was apparently building some secret business empire. The irony of the situation hung heavy in the air. Madison had been so invested in appearing successful that she'd resorted to criminal behavior, while Aurora had been quietly building legitimate wealth through careful planning and hard work. Aurora pulled out another document. "Madison, I have two choices here. I can report this embezzlement to the authorities and let criminal justice take its course, or I can work with you to develop a restitution plan that protects your clients while giving you a chance to make things right." Dad straightened in his chair, recognizing the olive branch Aurora was extending. What kind of restitution plan? Madison would need to repay every stolen penny with interest close Henderson Marketing Solutions immediately to prevent further theft and accept employment at minimum wage to ensure supervised financial behavior during the repayment period. Madison looked up with desperate hope. Employment where? Aurora's smile was small but genuine. "Working for me, of course. My property management business could use an assistant, and I'd be able to monitor your financial rehabilitation personally." The offer was both generous and humiliating, giving Madison a path forward while ensuring she faced appropriate consequences for her actions. Mom and Dad exchanged glances, recognizing that Aurora was offering mercy their daughter didn't necessarily deserve. "What would this job involve?" Madison asked quietly. "Everything from tenant communications to maintenance coordination to basic cleaning and repairs. Starting salary would be minimum wage with raises possible based on demonstrated reliability and trustworthiness." The job Aurora described was essentially the same type of work Madison had mockingly offered her just days earlier, but now the offer came with genuine respect for honest labor and clear expectations for personal growth. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected complication that neither Aurora nor Madison had anticipated. Just as Aurora was finalizing the renovation contracts in her temporary office setup, her phone rang with an urgent call from Jennifer Walsh at Premier Construction. "Aurora, we have a situation at 215 Oak Street. There are police cars and some very upset people demanding to speak with tenant representatives. You might want to get down here immediately." Aurora grabbed her keys and headed downtown, finding the building's lobby filled with agitated individuals who clearly weren't there for routine business matters. 3 police officers stood near the elevator taking notes, while a well-dressed older man in an expensive suit gestured angrily toward the upper floors. "Are you Aurora Stevens?" the man asked, approaching her with barely controlled fury. "I'm Robert Castellano, owner of Riverside Restaurant Group. We need to discuss your tenant, Madison Phillips, immediately." Officer Martinez stepped forward with her notepad. "Ms. Stevens, Mr. Castellano has filed a formal complaint alleging financial irregularities involving one of your tenants. We'd like to include you in our investigation." Aurora's stomach dropped as she realized Madison's embezzlement had been discovered by her largest client. "What specifically is Mr. Castellano alleging?" "That woman has been stealing from our marketing accounts for months," Robert said, his voice rising with each word. "My accountant discovered systematic withdrawals that don't match any authorized expenses. We're missing over $11,000 from budgets she was supposed to manage." Officer Martinez consulted her notes. "The complainant alleges embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraudulent accounting practices. Mr. Castellano's attorney has provided extensive documentation supporting these claims." Aurora felt the walls closing in around both herself and Madison. As the building owner, she could potentially face scrutiny about her tenant screening processes, and Madison was about to face serious criminal charges that would destroy any chance of peaceful resolution. "Officer Martinez, I need to make you aware that I discovered these same financial irregularities yesterday during routine lease renewal procedures. I was planning to address them through civil restitution rather than criminal prosecution." Robert's expression hardened further. "Restitution, Ms. Stevens. This woman has been systematically looting client accounts while presenting herself as a successful business professional. This isn't a civil matter, it's theft pure and simple." Additional voices joined the confrontation as other victims arrived. Dr. Sarah Hendricks from Memorial Hospital appeared with her own attorney, followed by James Wright from the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. Madison's embezzlement had apparently affected multiple clients simultaneously, and they'd coordinated their response through their legal representatives. "We're not interested in private restitution arrangements," Dr. Hendricks announced firmly. "Madison Phillips needs to face criminal consequences for her actions. Our hospital's charitable fundraising accounts were compromised, affecting community health programs." Officer Martinez's radio crackled with updates from her colleagues, who were apparently already upstairs executing a search warrant on Henderson Marketing Solutions. "Ms. Stevens will need access to any tenant records you maintain, particularly financial information related to Henderson Marketing Solutions." Aurora provided the requested documentation while trying to process the rapidly deteriorating situation. What had begun as a family conflict about respect and assumptions was now becoming a criminal investigation involving multiple victims and serious felony charges. Madison appeared in the lobby flanked by 2 additional officers, her hands cuffed behind her back and her face streaked with tears. She'd obviously been arrested at her office, probably in full view of her employees and any clients who happened to be visiting. "Aurora," Madison called out desperately as the officers guided her toward the exit. "Please call Mom and Dad. Tell them I'm sorry about everything." The sight of her sister in handcuffs was devastating despite everything that had happened between them. Aurora watched Madison being loaded into a police car while building tenants and passers-by gathered to observe the spectacle. Henderson Marketing Solutions' reputation was destroyed, and Madison's professional life had ended in the most public and humiliating way possible. Robert Castellano handed Aurora his business card. "Ms. Stevens, my attorney will be contacting you about recovering our stolen funds. I assume you'll cooperate fully with the investigation." Dr. Hendricks nodded in agreement. "Our hospital will also be pursuing full restitution through legal channels. We can't allow this kind of theft to go unpunished regardless of family relationships." Officer Martinez closed her notepad and addressed Aurora directly. "Ms. Stevens, you'll need to provide a formal statement about your knowledge of the defendant's activities. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning?" Aurora agreed to cooperate while watching her building's lobby slowly empty of angry clients and curious onlookers. The renovation project would continue as planned, but the Henderson Marketing Solutions office would stand empty, a reminder of how quickly pride and desperation could destroy years of careful work. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Aurora, we just heard about Madison on the news. Can you come over? We need to talk about what happens next." The family intervention had backfired spectacularly, exposing Madison's crimes to public scrutiny and criminal prosecution rather than allowing for private resolution. Aurora had offered mercy, but Madison's victims demanded justice, and the legal system would now determine her sister's fate. As Aurora walked back to her car, she reflected on the past week's events. Saturday's humiliating dinner had set in motion a chain of revelations that nobody could have predicted. Madison's attempt to embarrass Aurora had ultimately exposed Madison's own criminal behavior, destroying her career and reputation, while proving that Aurora's success was not only real, but substantial enough to weather any family crisis. The irony was complete. Madison had questioned Aurora's ability to provide for Jake while systematically stealing from her own clients to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle. Now Madison faced potential prison time, while Aurora's property empire continued growing stronger each month. 6 weeks later, Aurora sat in the visitor's room at Springfield County Detention Center, waiting for Madison to appear behind the reinforced glass partition. The orange jumpsuit and institutional setting were jarring reminders of how dramatically their lives had changed since that Saturday dinner. Madison looked thinner and older, her usual perfect makeup replaced by the harsh reality of incarceration. She picked up the telephone handset with trembling fingers, her eyes filled with shame and exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," Madison whispered, her voice barely audible through the phone connection. "Mom said you've been helping with my legal fees." Aurora nodded, studying her sister's transformed appearance. Your attorney thinks we can negotiate a plea agreement that includes supervised probation instead of prison time, but it requires full restitution to all victims and community service. I don't have any money left for restitution. They seized my accounts, repossessed the car, and I'm losing the apartment. I have absolutely nothing. Actually, you do have something, Aurora said quietly. You have the opportunity to earn back what you stole through honest work if you're willing to accept some difficult conditions. Madison leaned forward, hope flickering in her eyes. What kind of conditions? Aurora pulled out a legal document and held it up to the glass. I've spoken with all your victims and their attorneys. They're willing to accept a structured restitution plan if you work for me at minimum wage until every penny is repaid with interest. Work for you doing what? Building maintenance tenant services, administrative support, cleaning repairs, whatever needs doing. The job I originally offered you would actually become your full-time responsibility. Madison's face flushed with the memory of Saturday's dinner and her condescending attitude toward manual labor. For how long? Aurora consulted her calculations. Total restitution, including interest and legal fees, comes to $43,800. At minimum wage, working 40 hours weekly, it would take approximately 3 years to repay everything. The magnitude of the commitment settled over Madison like a weight. 3 years of minimum wage work living under Aurora's supervision, performing the exact type of labor she'd once considered beneath her dignity. There are additional conditions, Aurora continued. You'd live in the small apartment above Chen's architecture firm, rent-free but with strict financial monitoring. No credit cards, no personal loans, no financial decisions without approval. Every penny you earn goes toward restitution, except basic living expenses. Madison closed her eyes, processing the offer that represented both salvation and humiliation. What about therapy? The court is requiring psychological counseling for impulse control and financial responsibility. That's included in the arrangement. Dr. Patricia Reeves specializes in rehabilitation for white-collar offenders. She'll help you understand why you made these choices and develop healthier coping strategies. The phone trembled in Madison's hand as she considered her alternatives. Prison would destroy any chance of rebuilding her life, but accepting Aurora's offer meant publicly acknowledging her failures while performing work she'd previously mocked. Madison, I need you to understand something important. This isn't charity, and it's not me being a pushover sister. This is a legitimate business arrangement that protects the victims while giving you a chance to redeem yourself through honest effort. Why are you doing this for me after everything I said, everything I did to humiliate you? Aurora's expression softened slightly. Because Jake was watching that night when you tried to embarrass me, and he needs to see that families can choose forgiveness and redemption over revenge and punishment. But mostly because I believe people can change if they're willing to do the hard work. Madison wiped tears from her cheeks with her free hand. The work you're describing, it's exactly what you offered me at dinner. I was so cruel about it, so dismissive of honest labor. Yes, it is. And now you'll understand exactly what that work entails and why it deserves respect rather than condescension. Every person who cleans offices, maintains buildings, or provides services is contributing something valuable to their community. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Madison would be performing the same job she'd mockingly suggested for Aurora, but now it represented her only path back to legitimacy and self-respect. What happens if I accept? When do I start? Aurora smiled for the first time during their conversation. Your attorney files the plea agreement next week. If the judge approves the restitution plan, you'll be released on supervised probation and can start work immediately. The victims get their money back. Gradually, you stay out of prison, and you earn back your dignity through honest effort. Madison stared at the document through the glass, recognizing that Aurora was offering her something precious, a second chance, earned through sacrifice rather than given through pity. There's one more condition, Aurora added. You need to apologize personally to Jake for humiliating his mother in front of the family. He's old enough to understand what happened, and he deserves to hear you acknowledge your mistake. The thought of facing Jake after everything that had occurred made Madison's stomach churn with shame. That sweet little boy had witnessed his aunt attack his mother's competence and dignity, only to discover that his mother was actually successful, while his aunt was a criminal. "I'll do it," Madison said finally. "All of it. The work, the therapy, the restitution, the apology to Jake. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Aurora nodded approvingly. "Then we start rebuilding your life through honest work and genuine accountability. It won't be easy, Madison, but it will be real." As Aurora prepared to leave, Madison pressed her hand against the glass partition. "Aurora, I'm genuinely sorry for Saturday night. I was wrong about everything, and I hurt you and Jake because of my own insecurities and jealousy. I know you are. And in 3 years, when you've repaid every victim and rebuilt your integrity through hard work, we'll be able to have family dinners again where everyone treats everyone else with respect." The promise of eventual redemption gave Madison something to work toward beyond mere survival. Aurora's offer wasn't just about avoiding prison, it was about reconstructing her character through the discipline of honest labor and genuine accountability. 1 year later, Aurora stood in the fully renovated lobby of 215 Oak Street, admiring the marble floors and modern lighting that had transformed the building into a showcase property. Tenants were thriving in their updated spaces, and the building's reputation attracted premium businesses seeking prestigious downtown addresses. Madison emerged from the maintenance office wearing work clothes and carrying a toolbox. Her appearance completely changed from the designer-suited professional she'd once been. Her hair was pulled back. Practically her hands showed calluses from honest work, and her face reflected a serenity that had been absent during her previous life of financial stress and deception. The Chen architecture firm's air conditioning is running perfectly now. Madison reported, checking items off her maintenance list. "Dr. Walsh's dental practice needs new light fixtures in the waiting room, and I've scheduled the electrician for tomorrow morning." Aurora reviewed Madison's work schedule with pride, noting the thoroughness and reliability her sister had developed over months of supervised employment. Every tenant praised Madison's responsiveness and professionalism, and several had commented on how much they appreciated her attention to detail. "How are you feeling about your progress review with Dr. Reeves?" Aurora asked, referring to Madison's monthly therapy sessions. Madison smiled genuinely, an expression that seemed more natural now than the forced confidence she'd previously displayed. "She says I'm developing healthier relationships with money and success. Learning to find satisfaction in honest work instead of external validation has been harder than I expected, but it's also been liberating." Jake bounded through the lobby doors fresh from his after-school program and gave both his mother and aunt enthusiastic hugs. The 10-year-old had grown taller over the past year, and his confidence had blossomed as he watched his family rebuild their relationships through honesty and respect. "Aunt Madison, did you fix the playground equipment at the community center?" he asked excitedly. Madison ruffled his hair affectionately. "All finished, buddy. The monkey bars are solid, and the swing set has new chains. You can tell your friends it's safe to play on again." Aurora watched this interaction with deep satisfaction. Madison's community service requirements included maintaining playground equipment at various Springfield locations, and she discovered genuine fulfillment in work that directly benefited children and families. "Madison, why don't you join us for dinner tonight?" Aurora suggested. "Jake's making his famous spaghetti and meatballs." "I'd love that, but only if Jake doesn't mind having his convicted felon aunt at the dinner table." Madison replied with self-deprecating humor that acknowledged her past without wallowing in shame. Jake looked confused. "Aunt Madison, you're not a convicted felon anymore. You're just Aunt Madison who fixes things and helps people." The simple wisdom of a child's perspective brought tears to Madison's eyes. Through Jake's lens, she wasn't defined by her worst mistake, but by her current choices and daily actions. Aurora's phone buzzed with a text message from her newest tenant, a startup tech company that had leased the former Henderson Marketing Solutions space. "Everything looks perfect for tomorrow's move-in. Thank you for all your help coordinating the transition." The ironic completion of the cycle wasn't lost on Aurora. Madison's former office now housed a young entrepreneur who reminded Aurora of herself during the early days of building her property business, determined, resourceful, and hungry for success, achieved through legitimate effort. "Aurora, can I ask you something?" Madison said as they prepared to lock up the building for the evening. "Of course." "Do you ever regret offering me this chance instead of letting me go to prison?" Aurora considered the question carefully. "Madison, watching you rebuild your character through honest work has been more satisfying than any revenge could have been. You're becoming the person you always had the potential to be." Madison nodded thoughtfully. "I spent so many years trying to look successful that I forgot how to actually be successful. This job has taught me the difference between achievement and accomplishment." They walked together toward the parking garage, Jake skipping ahead of them while chattering about his school day. The family dynamic had completely transformed from the toxic competition and judgment that had characterized their previous relationships. "Jake, what's the most important thing you've learned this year?" Aurora asked as they reached their cars. The boy stopped skipping and considered the question seriously. "That people can change if they're willing to work hard, and that families are stronger when everyone tells the truth instead of pretending to be perfect." Madison knelt down to Jake's eye level. "Jake, I owe you another apology for that dinner last year. I was wrong to embarrass your mom, and I'm sorry you had to see adults behaving badly." Jake hugged his aunt tightly. "It's okay, Aunt Madison. Mom says mistakes are only bad if you don't learn from them. You learned, so now it's just a story about getting better." As Aurora drove home with Jake, she reflected on the lessons embedded in their family's transformation. Madison had learned that true success required integrity and genuine effort rather than impressive facades. Aurora had learned that mercy could be more powerful than justice when combined with appropriate accountability. And Jake had learned that redemption was possible through consistent daily choices rather than dramatic gestures. The building renovation had been completed months ago, but the family renovation was an ongoing project that required patience, forgiveness, and commitment to growth. Aurora's property empire continued expanding, but more importantly, her family's foundation had been rebuilt on honesty and mutual respect. That evening, as Jake stirred his homemade spaghetti sauce and Madison set the table with care, Aurora realized that her grandmother's legacy extended far beyond the real estate portfolio. Eleanor Stevens had believed in second chances, hard work, and the importance of family bonds that could weather any crisis. The job application Madison had mockingly offered Aurora exactly 1 year ago had ultimately led to Madison's redemption through the same type of honest labor she'd once scorned. The circle was complete, but instead of ending with revenge, it concluded with restoration and renewed hope for their family's future. "Tell me," Aurora asked her readers, "have you ever discovered that someone you underestimated was actually more successful than they appeared? How did that revelation change your perspective on judging others by their circumstances? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below." She paused, smiling at the memory of that transformative dinner. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about families overcoming challenges through honesty and perseverance. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that redemption is always possible through genuine effort and accountability. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family healing and personal growth. Remember, true success isn't about what you own or how you look to others. It's about who you choose to be when facing life's most difficult moments. Until next time, may your own family find strength in truth and grace in second chances.